How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is MJ Banias. I'm very happy to be here with you today for this sweet online UFO conference that's happening. I mean, how great is that? I hope you're all taking care of yourself. I hope you're all, staying safe, staying away from each other, following kind of the CDC's guidelines on social distancing. This is obviously one of those weird times in history I'm sure we'll all laugh about and cry about at the same time. I'm at the cabin. As you can see, I'm in the woods here. Jason McClellan asked me to shoot a video for you guys in regards to UFOs. And I was like, what better place to do it than out here in the wilderness? So, I want to talk today about UFOs as sort of this countercultural idea. That's really where my focus is when it comes to UFOs. I am interested in what UFOs are as objects and who's behind them or whatever. But I really think, unfortunately at this time, I think that that's kind of the wrong questions and the wrong answers we're trying to kind of get to. Trying to figure out who's behind UFOs, what UFOs are, whether they're technology or whether they're some sort of mystical, divine concept that exists with humans or whatever. Who knows, right? I mean, this is speculation at best. We unfortunately don't have enough evidence for any of this. So what can we actually look at? And this is kind of the part that, generally for a lot of people pisses them off, right? There is no real answer to the UFO kind of enigma yet. So what can we look at? Fundamentally, it's the people. It's the culture that creates UFOs. It's the culture that deals with UFOs. It's the social frameworks and the media and the value systems that kind of exist in our world every day that kind of generate a UFO reality. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about UFOs as really a countercultural movement, and the UFO discourse is a sort of countercultural conversation we're all having. So what we need to do is we need to kind of first really look at what we mean here. On one hand, right, on the objective end, we have human observation, right? We have individuals who see UFOs. We have individuals who encounter anomalous phenomena, whether it's flying saucers, whether it's orbs or lights in the sky, whether it's angelic beings, whether it's Mothmen, who knows, man? We have these cases, these observable moments, right, that, happen. Sure, you're always going to have your percentage that's going to be delusion, and you're always going to have your percentage that's going to be hoaxes and your kind of null cases. But you also are going to have, of all of that, a collection of cases that are, genuine, at least to a point. So we have some sort of objective idea happening here, some sort of objective concept that is being created or at least manifesting in some way. You have human experience and human observation that is recordable, at least historically. But on the flip side of that, right, the flip side of this weird UFO reality is obviously kind of the more subjective angle. The cultural milieu in which these UFOs appear, the media, social values, religious values, all of these social constructs that exist around us, these paradigms of society that really also govern the UFO discourse. To suggest that UFOs aren't affected by media interpretation and then therefore our interpretation is ridiculous. It's undefensible. Obviously, that's what's going on. So we need to kind of juxtapose these two ideas, right? On top of the media and on top of politics and on top of history, you also have literally like a whole culture of lunacy, right? You have UFO cults, you have conspiracy theories dictating that there's dead bodies in some underground bunker somewhere. You have all of these also other ridiculous claims that exist within UFO discourse that also add to this kind of more social, cultural interpretation of what UFOs are. So really fundamentally, these two sides, this kind of objective human experience, the objective act of seeing something that is anomalous, and then the other side, right? The media, the culture, the society, cults, conspiracy theorists, all that nonsense that also kind of exists. And these two kind of commingle and create ufology, or create UFO discourse. And the question becomes, well, how do we make progress in the study of UFOs? How does a ufologist, quote unquote, go out and make progress in the study, in the ology of UFOs? And this is the part that pisses us off, right? Because ultimately we're kind of stuck. We're stuck in this dualistic realm between worlds, right? We're stuck in this idea that, okay, something objective is going on, but that objective thing is being governed and filtered through this kind of cultural and social lens that's really screwing up the objectivity of it, right? It's a sort of observer bias multiplied by 1,000, and then, a million as well. What we ultimately have here is observation and experience versus a sort of cultural framework, a cultural paradigm that is occurring, right? You have all of these constructs merging. My key example of this, and I think that this is going to upset a few people, but the idea of the flying saucer, for example, was totally an error. To suggest that there's an objective reality and it's not being affected by our culture is ridiculous. Kenneth Arnold in 1947, when he had his UFO experience, right? He was flying over Mount Rainier in Washington, and he saw 9 objects, I believe, that were sort of crescent-shaped, flying through the mountains at an incredible speed. He reports it, and a journalist on the ground makes an error, right? The journalist calls them flying saucers, and in reality they weren't. They were kind of more like flying bananas, but Arnold describes them as they were like saucers skipping on water, but the journalist refers to them as flying saucers. And you'll never guess what happened. Like, you'll never imagine. People started seeing not flying crescent-shaped objects, they started seeing flying saucers, all because a journalist screwed it up. I mean, this is a perfect example of how an objective experience, let's say, Kenneth Arnold's sighting of an anomalous something or other, could have been anything, who knows, could have been birds for all we know, but the point is, he saw something that was anomalous, and a journalist and a newspaper is what creates fundamentally the flying saucer phenomena. People started seeing discs everywhere, and the big question you need to ask yourself is, one, was every single UFO sighting of a flying disc a complete hoax or a complete delusion? Of course not. Percentage-wise, that's impossible. Not everyone in the world is delusional or trying to hoax. Rather, UFOs took on the cultural milieu of the day. People think we look like flying saucers? We're flying saucers. Now, obviously, that's a bit of a stretch. I'm not saying UFOs think like that. But what you had was this objective observation people were making concerning flying saucers. And the social, cultural ideology of the flying saucer kind of manifesting itself as a flying saucer, even though Arnold's sighting was not a flying saucer. It's a seemingly kind of ridiculous situation, but that's what it is. So UFOs bring us into this kind of weird world. Weird. You have this kind of weird in-between, right? This mixing of objective reality and cultural reality. This is really where UFOs dwell. This is really where the truth of the UFO phenomena exists, in this weird kind of gap world, in this in-between world, this world of fact and fiction, truth and mythology, real and not real, kind of merging together into one thing. In my book, I talk about Jacques Derrida. He's a French philosopher, and he came up with this notion of the specter, or the ghost. Now, in his work, he's obviously not talking about UFOs, and he's not talking about ghosts. He's talking about sort of politics and the culture of post-Cold War Europe. Moot point. What he comes up with is this idea that there are certain concepts that exist, and they're spectral, they're ghosts, and what they are is they're ideas that exist in kind of two worlds, right? They're real and not real simultaneously. Now, he was talking about communism in Europe, but in the case of UFOs, they fit. You have this kind of interesting merger of something real occurring, real events, anomalous events, though they may be, but real, merging with odd cultural, social, media-influenced influenced by cult leaders and conspiracy theorists, and these two kind of concepts merge into this unknown, murky middle ground. Middle Earth. I get busted by copyright infringement. The problem with existing in this kind of ghostly realm in the middle between these two realities is really you get to this place of undefinition. You cannot define what a UFO is anymore, not in any real objective sense, not in any real sense that will actually lead you to a solution to the problem. And the only reason for that is because every time we try to define what a UFO is, we're adding more layers to what UFOs actually are, right? So when I start thinking about UFOs, I don't think about them from some objective, reaching place from nowhere, right? I have to think about UFOs from my cultural place. I can't suddenly walk out of my social world and say, well, I'm going to look at the world objectively. Don't be ridiculous. That's impossible. None of us can do that. No one can view their own reality outside of their own reality. Nobody can view their own culture, their own ideas outside of that. Right? There's not really such thing as objective thinking, right? We're all stuck within our culture. We're all stuck within this little entrenched social world we've grown up in, right? You are governed by the experiences you've had. You're governed by your education. You're governed by what your parents taught you, what your teachers taught you, what your friends taught you. You're governed by all that stuff. So the inherent issue with UFOs is, as people who study UFOs, we are inherently stuck within our cultural world, and we're trying to define something objective. We're trying to come to a conclusion about something. One, that doesn't follow any rules, and two, is really only observed by people who also are in their own little cultural worlds, right? So that's going to muddy the water even more. We're trying to perceive something, come up with a solution to something, come up with an answer about something. But we're inherently trapped, right? We're inherently trapped in our own little cultural existence. So how can we come to an objective conclusion concerning something like UFOs that already exist in this weird duality between fact and fiction, that exist in this weird duality between objective experience and cultural experience? On top of that, we're adding our own cultural interpretations upon our sightings and upon our experiences. And not only that, the people doing the research, the investigation, the ufologist is also adding their own cultural and social interpretations into the mix. We are fundamentally in, freaking gong show, man, of chaotic nonsense in regards to UFOs, right? What can we do with that information? Where can we begin? Ultimately, the more explanation we try to add to UFOs, right? Ultimately, the more we try to define UFOs, the more definitions we're putting in place, the more filters we're creating for ourselves, the more kind of ideas we're jamming in down the UFO throat. In effect, we constantly create more ideologies. We continue adding ideological paradigms on top of it over and over and over again. I mean, again, this is evidence just to cite this here. I mean, it's obvious. Look at what people thought UFOs were in the 1940s and 50s and 60s. They were clearly riveted together machines from spacemen from Venus and Mars, and they looked like us, and they would deliver messages about, you guys have the nuclear bomb, and you should stop fighting with Russia because the Intergalactic Federation is getting upset, and we're nervous about you humans, but don't worry, we're all friendly, and we're here to help you, and we're going to save you. And then you had this whole Space Brother movement, and really, it was based upon ideas that were popular in the 1950s and 60s. It was based upon that cultural framework of what technology could have been. Now look at ufology today. Go on UFO Twitter, #UFO Twitter. Go on UFO Twitter and look at what people are talking about. Quantum mechanics and quantum physics, and the aliens must be using some sort of quantum system to travel around, and you have stuff about consciousness, and you have stuff, all these new age ideas. I mean, it's just mimicking exactly what our society is. It's ridiculous today in the 21st century to think that UFOs come from Mars and they come from Venus. It's ridiculous. We know now enough about Mars and Venus to be able to assure people, and we just know in general, there's no UFOs from Venus and Mars. And they're certainly not Space Brothers, and they certainly don't have some sort of intergalactic federation of planets. That's from Star Trek. So as we change, UFOs change with us. As we change, the entire framework of ufology changes alongside us. It's not that ufology is getting better answers. It's not that ufology is onto something. Rather, it's less onto it than it's ever been. We're getting further away as time moves on. As we continue to study UFOs, as we continue to get into UFOs, as we continue to engage with the subject matter, as we continue to try and define what UFOs are, we're simply adding more to the mystery. But this is maybe the beauty of ufology and the beauty of UFOs, right? Everyone loves a good mystery every once in a while. And ufology, man, don't get me started. UFOs is basically the mystery novel that really never ends. I mean, it's fundamentally this constant search. And I think that's why it's compelling, right? We like the idea of searching all the time. We like the idea of mysteries. We like the idea of not knowing where something is, or not knowing what's over the hill or around the next bend, and trying to figure it out. We're excellent mythologizers. Why is there a tennis ball on this tree? I don't know. That's weird. It's like signs all up in here. So where does this fundamentally leave us, right? Like, where are we left then, ufologically speaking? Pissed off. That's the first thing. Because, listen, I hate to burst your ufological bubbles. I can just see the thumbs downs there. Listen, where does this leave us? What can we fundamentally do? What can we fundamentally study? Is trying to ascertain the science here really the answer? I don't know. Because we just don't have enough answers. We don't have enough observable data from UFOs to come to any conclusion. Not only that, the damn things keep changing. In the 1950s and 60s, UFOs acted and looked and worked very differently than they do today. They had landing gear and ladders. Little people would get out of the, they'd crawl down their little ladders and they would collect soil samples and fauna samples and flora samples. They'd steal a squirrel or something, and then they would see a human and be like, "What?" And they'd jump back in the ship and then fly off. I mean, if that happened today, good Lord, that's ridiculous. UFO sightings today are very different. So we have to kind of start to question, the sightings that people are having, that objective reality, how much of it is really merging with the social reality? So where are we left? If UFOs aren't some stable idea we can study, they're not a stable concept we can study, they're not a stable construct we can study, we have no idea what they are, we have no idea when they'll show up, they're not repeatable, there's no evidence really to engage with, where are we left? What is ufology to do? It becomes a game of culture. We're left to be able to really fundamentally look at people at this point. We can look at the cultural ideas that frame up ufology. We can look at the social constructs, the cultural baggage we all have, the experiences we all have, the way our society perceives its own reality. That's really where ufology ought to be heading. It should be a cultural game. It should be exploring the cultural phenomena of UFOs and less the scientific one. We ultimately need to deconstruct the cultural concepts that frame up kind of this UFO reality. The inherent problem to this is every time we attempt to deconstruct anything, anytime we try to get to the root of what's going on, we obviously need to understand we're adding more layers to the construction. This is ultimately what Derrida points out when it comes to deconstruction. Whenever you try to understand something better, whenever you try to define something, whenever you try to give it an explanation, whenever you add more information to the idea, you're building more layers up, you're adding more filters to that concept. You ultimately get bogged down by the deconstruction itself. So this needs to kind of get all boiled down now to my big thesis here, which is, why are UFOs countercultural? It really kind of comes down to something simple. UFOs are taboo in polite society, in sort of elite society, in scientific and academic societies, right? Especially by more conservative thinkers. UFOs are taboo because I think they bring out the fundamental flaw that we need to kind of see that's right in front of us. We've created for ourselves in sort of the 20th and 21st centuries, and even earlier, but in the 20th and 21st centuries for sure, this notion that science and technology, sort of empiricism, is really the be-all and end-all of knowledge. And the beauty of empirical thinking, the beauty of scientific method, the beauty of an academia, of an ivory tower, of structures of elite knowledge, is they require kind of one key notion, that humans themselves and human thinking is the highest point of civilization and society and the cosmos. Empiricism itself, the scientific method itself, all scientific thinking hinges upon the notion that humans are able to understand the universe and everything around us. We govern reality. We shape our own destiny. We are the arbiters of knowledge. We, as a group, as a species, under the guise of empiricism, are the way, the truth, and the light. And fundamentally, what UFOs do is they call that all into question. They challenge this fundamental thinking. They challenge this notion that empiricism has and will have all the answers. We've chosen to live our lives as a society upon this notion that humans are it, right? We're the top of the food chain. The technical term for this is anthropocentrism, right? We are the center of knowledge and truth. We are the center of sort of the universe in a sense, and all knowledge kind of revolves around us. And as we develop more science, better science, as we develop technology and better technology, we can start yanking that knowledge towards us like a big gravitational field, and we can kind of consume it, understand it, and there you go, there's another kind of piece of the puzzle. And following a very Aristotelian model, we can ultimately understand the entire universe. Nothing can stand in the way of us. UFOs, though, kind of question this notion, right? UFOs constantly change with the times. They're constantly just a little bit out of reach. They're constantly just around the bend and over the hill. And as we get closer, they move further away. UFOs are not following how empirical evidence and scientific method, it dictates the universe ought to work. UFOs prove fundamentally that empiricism is not the only arbiter of knowledge. It goes to show that empiricism, scientific method, all that stuff, while great, like, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of science, I'm a huge fan of the scientific method. Like, listen, ufologically speaking, I'm a skeptic, like, bad. Ultimately, we're kind of in this worldview that we're trapped in of empiricism, of anthropocentrism, of this notion that we can achieve anything through knowledge, and it just might not be the case, right? And that's why UFOs piss people off. That's why UFOs piss off scientists, and they piss off academics, especially conservative ones. They piss off people who exist in this sort of elite state, who have basically built their entire lives and their foundation upon the knowledge that everything is possible, that all, if we apply enough empirical thinking to something, we can reach it. UFOs call that all into question. UFOs bring that house of cards tumbling down. And we're left and we're stuck. We kind of are left to wallow now in this weird place of ambiguity. We don't know what reality is then. We don't know what is the real path to knowledge. There might not be one. Fundamentally, it could be a whole mix of things as well. Who the hell knows, man? So we need to engage in ufological discourse that deals more by calling these concepts into question, that engages with the cultural aspects of ufology. I mean, it doesn't matter how much truth we get to, how much truth we try and get to. We're dealing with a mythological question here. I think we need to start looking at the reasons of why it's mythological. We need to start looking at the mythology itself and the people who generate those mythologies and why they generate those mythologies. We're engaged in a study of something that by its very nature has to remain unknown. Thanks very much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time and hanging out with me in the forest. If you want to find my work, if you want to keep tabs on me, you can do it via social media, or you can go to my website, www.mjbanias.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at MJ Banias. Shoot me a DM, shoot me an email, call me on my phone if you have my phone number. I hope you don't. And listen, stay safe. I love you all. Have a happy quarantine. Take care of each other. And I'll catch you later. See ya.